So I'm Tanya Couch, and in 2002 I spent the summer working in a small village on the west coast of Ireland. Cong is a lovely place with quaint, whitewashed buildings. It has a natural stream that bubbles up in the middle of an old parking lot that's called the Rising of the Waters, and it has the remains of a medieval monastery sort of tucked off into one corner. Needless to say, I was thrilled to call this village my home, even if it was just for a few months. And as I settled in over the next few days, I was kind of struck by the number of American tourists that were arriving in town. And every day it seemed like there were more and more American tourists. So one evening, over a pint at the local pub, I asked what was going on. And the owner told me so proudly that it was the 50th anniversary of The Quiet Man. And I probably stared at him blankly because he looked at me, and the table full of tourists looked at me, and they said, "John Wayne? The movie?" And they were absolutely aghast when I had no idea what they were talking about. And so I learned very quickly that The Quiet Man is one of the classics of American cinema, and that it had actually been filmed in the village of Cong in the 1950s. So over the course of the next week, there were walking tours of the village to see specific locations where things had been filmed. Locals who had been involved in the production shared their memories with visitors. There was even an epic reenactment of the fight scene that takes place at the end of the movie that took place in the middle of the town square. And it was so much fun just to see how fondly this movie was remembered by the Irish people directly connected to it, and by the American tourists who had come such a long way just to experience the place where this incredible movie was filmed.
Hello, film historians. I'm Derek and I love old movies. We've got Sam the sidekick here.
Hello, and welcome to episode 27, where at long last we'll be looking at a film by one of my favorites.
Steve McQueen?
No.
Oh. Lee Marvin?
No.
You have too many favorites.
Yes, I do. But we're talking about John Wayne here, so
Oh.
this particular circumstance is a big deal.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Now, why exactly we haven't done one of his films by now is a mystery to me, but...
Well, come on. It's not like he was in any horror films. So October was out.
Sure.
And Christmas movies? No.
Okay, yeah, but...
And he wasn't in any of the requests.
What about war movies, huh? He made plenty of war movies.
Okay. If we're going to do John Wayne, we aren't doing him in a war movie.
And yet, when we finally do a film with him, it's not a Western. So figure that one out.
Just keeping you on your toes, kid. Today, of course, we are taking a look at The Quiet Man from 1952, directed by John Ford and co-starring Maureen O'Hara.
Part comedy, part drama, and part romance, so it qualifies for all our lovey-dovey month of February.
Sure.
And we just had a guest cold open. Those are the best.
They really are. And this time we heard from Tanya Couch. Tanya is an educator, artist, and traveler who just happened to have a really cool connection to this film. So we reached out to see if she would do the cold open for us.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
So thanks to Miss Couch for doing that.
And if reading a cold open is the sort of thing you would like to do, sharing a personal narrative and discussing your history with film or a particular film, please get in touch and let's make that happen.
I feel like we have a bit more business to cover than usual, so we should get to that. I really want to get going with the film.
Fair enough. Okay, well, for starters, as always, please take a moment to hit like, subscribe, share, or drop us some stars, or leave a review. Wherever you are listening to us, there is something you can do to show your support and let us know that you like it, so please do that thing.
And to keep track of us all the time, please give us a follow on the socials. That's the best way to get all the up-to-the-minute stuff from us.
Tell them how.
You can find us on the Facebook.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
On Instagram.
At I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
El Twitter.
At ILOM podcast.
Or you can just send us a good old-fashioned email.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast at gmail.com.
All one word.
Okay, this is exciting. Our show is making its debut on Pet Rock Radio this month on February 18th.
Family Day.
And they are going to be running our back episodes 3 times a week, starting with Monday nights at 8 p.m. It's a really cool way for our show to hopefully discover a new audience.
Super excited about this.
And as part of our debut...
Yeah, Pet Rock Radio is announcing the New Music Award nominations that day. And we will be the ones reading those nominations.
So seriously, mark the 18th on your calendar and check us out on Pet Rock Radio. We'll go ahead and link that in the description so you can just pop on over at your convenience.
Tell them the gang over at ILOM sent you.
Okay, are you ready to get on with this?
Sure am. Next stop, the village of Innisfree.
And away we go. Our director is the legendary John Ford. Ford was both a director and naval officer, with a film career spanning over 50 years with more than 140 films. He is generally seen as one of the most influential directors of his generation, and was thought of very highly by his colleagues. Ford's first big film was The Iron Horse in 1924, and this was the first in a long line of westerns that he made throughout his career, including a classic of the genre, My Darling Clementine in 1946. Focusing on westerns so often eventually led to Ford meeting and befriending John Wayne, with whom he made many films. Their first film together was Stagecoach in 1940, and later made films together such as the Cavalry Trilogy, which consists of Fort Apache, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and Rio Grande. They later went on to make The Searchers in 1956, and at the end of his career, 6 of Ford's last 8 films were westerns, the genre with which he was most deeply associated. Ford won 4 Best Director Oscars, more than any other director, ever, along with 29 other awards, and was nominated for another 23. He's best known for his work on movies like The Quiet Man, The Grapes of Wrath, Stagecoach, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Ford was awarded the very first Lifetime Achievement Award by the AFI in 1973, and he died in 1973 at the age of 79.
The writer is Frank S. Nugent. Nugent was an American screenwriter, journalist, and film reviewer. He was first noticed by producer Daryl F. Zanuck for his vicious film reviews for the New York Times. This led to Nugent being hired as a script doctor and to provide criticism for scripts in Hollywood. He then met director John Ford on the set of The Fugitive in 1947. Ford then hired Nugent to work on his upcoming film Fort Apache in 1948, which was the starting point of a collaboration between the two that lasted for several films over many years. Throughout his career, Nugent wrote a total of 21 screenplays, 11 of which were directed by John Ford, including The Quiet Man, 1952, and The Searchers in 1956. His screenplay for The Searchers was actually ranked among the top 101 screenplays of all time by the Writers Guild of America, and was named the greatest Western of all time by the AFI in 2008. Nugent's final film, Incident at Phantom Hill in 1966, was released after he passed away in 1965 at the age of 57.
Standard disclaimer here. Sometimes we need to discuss film personalities whose careers were so vast and their influences on the industry so great that there is no way to do their lives and careers justice in the time we have. Obviously, putting the Duke, John Wayne, into some sort of perspective will take some doing. Born Marion Morrison in 1907, John Wayne signed as a bit player with Fox in the 20s, appearing in a string of uncredited roles in unremarkable films until being cast as the lead in Raoul Walsh's The Big Trail in 1930. That film flopped, but Wayne was able to continue finding work as a leading man in a long, long line of B-movie westerns. And this might have been the story of him, if it were not for being cast by John Ford in Stagecoach. The film was a true hit, and is even now considered a classic of the Western genre, and signaled the start of a working relationship between Wayne and Ford that would span decades and many films. A quintessential American movie hero, John Wayne was the personification of the greatness of their nation for many filmgoers, and his many roles as straight-up heroes cowboys, soldiers, and pilots cemented that status. But it was in his more challenging films, where he played characters with some moral ambiguity, like in The Searchers or Red River, that Wayne clearly showed both his range and his true value as a compelling leading man.
The Searchers, directed by John Ford.
Yeah. It might be fair to say that most of his best films were. He made 24 films with Ford in all, and certainly along with The Searchers, you've got The Quiet Man, Stagecoach, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. They're all standout movies. But then Howard Hawks did Red River and Rio Bravo, and those might be my two favorites with him. So I don't know.
Wait, you like Rio Bravo more than The Searchers?
Yeah, I do. I mean, his performance in The Searchers is much better, but I like Rio Bravo more overall as a movie.
I haven't seen Red River yet, but you keep telling me I should.
Oh, it's super good. You'd love it.
Okay, I trust you on this.
Wayne continued working very steadily through the 1960s, turning out more great westerns like McClintock and The Sons of Katie Elder, as well as some great war films like The Green Berets and The Longest Day. He even directed his passion project, The Alamo, with himself starring as Davy Crockett. That film was nominated for Best Picture. Wayne was very conservative and very patriotic, and he only wanted to appear in films that aligned with his values and made institutions he cared about, such as the military, come across in a good light. This stance led him to passing on the lead role in The Dirty Dozen, which he found too negative a portrayal.
I love John Wayne. I love The Dirty Dozen. I would never have wanted to see John Wayne in The Dirty Dozen. Just nope.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Wayne's finest moment of recognition as an actor came when he received a Best Actor Oscar for his role as Rooster Cogburn in True Grit. And although he made a dozen films after that, none were as good, and ill health began to take its toll on him. While there are some fine films in the 70s from him, none stack up favorably against his films from the 40s to the 60s. His last film, The Shootist, told of an aging gunfighter succumbing to cancer, much as Wayne himself was, putting a poetic capstone on his monumental career. John Wayne died in 1979 at the age of 72, a posthumous recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honors.
Irish-born Maureen O'Hara was 17 when she screen tested for Charles Lawton's film company in 1938. The test didn't go well, but Lawton was impressed anyway and signed O'Hara to a personal services contract. So essentially, she worked for him and not a studio. This arrangement led to her starring in Alfred Hitchcock's Jamaica Inn and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, both with Lawton. With both these films under her belt and still only 19, Lawton sold her contract to RKO, where it was transferred to 20th Century Fox, and O'Hara appeared in some very notable films in the 40s and 50s, including 3 Best Picture nominees. With movies such as How Green Was My Valley and Miracle on 42nd Street on her resume, O'Hara was solidified as one of Hollywood's top starlets, but she had trouble with being looked at as someone who is simply gorgeous on film and not as a great actress in her own right. Naturally athletic, she was capable of performing her own stunts, including fight scenes, which was virtually unheard of for women at this time. Appearances in films like The Black Swan and Against All Flags established her action star credibility and allowed her to perform with actors such as legendary swashbucklers Tyrone Power and Errol Flynn. The actor she appeared the most with was Anthony Quinn in 7 films, but it was certainly her collaborations with John Wayne for which she might be best remembered. O'Hara considered Wayne her best friend, and they remained close throughout their lives. And the 5 films they made together, 3 directed by John Ford, represent some of her best. The Quiet Man she held in special regard, considering it her favorite and best film. As her career slowed down in the 60s and ended altogether with a retirement in 1971, O'Hara was almost brought back to star opposite Wayne 2 more times. The plan was for her to appear in Rooster Cogburn and also in Wayne's last film, The Shootist. Obviously, it didn't work out, and she was replaced in those films by Katharine Hepburn and Lauren Bacall, respectively. O'Hara kept busy in her retirement, running both a magazine and a small airline after the death of her third husband. She returned to screen acting in the 90s with 4 appearances, a feature film with John Candy called Only the Lonely, and then 3 made-for-television films, her last being The Last Dance in 2000. Known as the Queen of Technicolor and the Pirate Queen, O'Hara received a Lifetime Achievement Oscar in 2014, a year before her death at the age of 95.
To say that John Ford had wanted to make The Quiet Man for a while would be a fair statement. Ford first bought the rights to the story in 1933 for the princely sum of $10, but it wasn't until 1951 when Ford cut a deal with Republic to finance the production of the film. Republic was strictly a B-movie company, and their production of a film that would see the studio net its only Best Picture nomination was a bit of a surprise. To secure funding, Ford, Wayne, and O'Hara had to first make a Western for Republic, and that film was Rio Grande. Once it was completed, the production team headed to Ireland, where all the exterior shots were done. The film was even shot in Technicolor, which was also very rare for Republic. Ford presented an Ireland as he imagined it, largely unburdened by the problems of class and politics, and especially religion. The squabbles the people in the movie have are all of a more personal sort, and Ford uses the camera lens to film Ireland at its most quaint, charming, and beautiful.
I know what you mean. It seems like a storybook brought to life, more so than an actual true story. Everything is just so idyllic.
Ford considered it his favorite picture, and considering he already had 3 Academy Awards for Best Director, that's saying something. Wayne loved it too, putting it in his top 3. And O'Hara placed it number 1. So clearly they captured some lightning in a bottle here, creating something that the 3 of them would feel so proud and affectionate towards for the rest of their lives.
What did the critics think of it?
At the time, it was generally well received, although despite there being a lot of praise for the cinematography and the performances, there was also criticism over the length and unrealistic portrayal of life in rural Ireland. Modern critics aren't quite as kind to the film, with words like misogynistic and outdated featured prominently.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I would say this is not a film that is kind to its female characters at all.
The film did well financially, enough to be quite successful, and of course was recognized at awards time. In fact, to this day, the area in Ireland, specifically the village of Cong, where the movie was filmed, remains a tourist attraction, specifically due to its connection with the filming of The Quiet Man. What's the tail of the tape on this one, Sam?
Okay, so we have a 7.8 on IMDb. Both the audience score and tomato meter are 91% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Ooh.
The film won Oscars for Best Director and Best Cinematography, the Directors Guild of America Award, as well as one from the Writers Guild of America. The film can be watched on Amazon Prime.
We open on the Republic logo, and we see a silhouetted townscape by the river, and the credits appear.
A train pulls into a station in Castletown. A voiceover introduces the scene. Innisfree is where Sean Thornton wants to go, but everyone argues on how he should get there. It's also charming and quaint, and oh, those Irish.
You know, Bing Crosby really wanted to play the part of Thornton.
Can't see it.
Yeah. All the locals watch him go on his way, wondering why he would ever want to go to Innisfree. He's a Yankee from Pittsburgh, but he was born there, and he has returned to stay. He wants to buy the little cottage he grew up in.
Ward Bond plays the local priest. He knows all Sean's family and remembers them all.
It is not a John Wayne movie until Ward Bond shows up.
So true. They were huge friends and huger drinking buddies. This would have been a fun little vacation for them.
Sean walks through a field and he sees a flock of sheep and a beautiful girl tending them. They lock eyes and the sparks fly. And then he heads to town and stops for a pint.
As one does.
And the next day, he's off to church.
As one does.
And after the service, he meets her, the beautiful girl. But she doesn't have much to say and runs off. We learn from Sean's friend Mcqueen that her name is Mary Kate. She's not married, she's dowerless, and she has a bad temper.
Sean goes to the wealthy widow, Mrs. Talon, who owns the cottage.
Will Danaher shows up also, since he wants it as well, and this creates tension between Sean and Will.
The two men basically bid for the land, but Thornton has more money. And Talon seems to like him more anyway, so Sean gets the cottage.
Will is Mary-Kate's brother. He's a drunk and a bully and a big old jackass. Mary-Kate seems to work hard to run the household, and she's glad Sean bought the land, and she feels he has more claim to it than Will does, since it's his ancestral home and all that.
Sean heads to the pub, buys some drinks, and the locals make a great party of it with song and fun.
Will shows up, grumping and frumping, and everyone makes fun of him. Will says, "Stay off my land and stay away from my sister."
Will tries to start a fight, but Sean sidesteps him and offers his hand in friendship. They have a squeeze-off. So at this point, everyone hates Will, and everyone thinks Sean is the coolest.
As night falls, Sean heads to his cottage to find a fire burning in the hearth. Doors are rattling, windows have no glass.
It's a bit of a fixer-upper.
And Mary-Kate is there. She has built the fire and cleaned the place up a bit. She tries to run, but Sean catches her and kisses her, and she slugs him for it. He thanks her for being so kind, and she kisses him back and leaves.
Okay, so funny? I read that when Maureen O'Hara slapped John Wayne in that scene, she actually broke her hand.
Ugh.
And since they weren't filming in sequence, she couldn't wear a bandage or anything, so she just worked and acted with a broken hand.
She was quite a lady.
The next day, the fixing up has begun, and the Reverend Mr. Playfair comes by for a visit. Is this some sort of religious team choosing thing? Catholics or Protestants, Sean? You're in Ireland, after all.
But no, it's really just being friendly.
Sean sends Mcqueen to inquire if Mary-Kate would be interested in hooking up. She's flattered, but wants to be able to take her fortune. Turns out she has one. Furniture and some inherited money, and some heirloom jewelry. Not exactly a pauper as advertised. And she likes the idea of the hookup.
So that night, Mcqueen and Sean come calling on Mary-Kate, and they are formally introduced. And then they have to go meet Will. He denies Sean and tosses him out of his house, threatening to sick his dogs on him. Sean says to Mary-Kate, "It's what you say that counts, not him." But she runs off. This is Ireland. Without her brother's consent, she couldn't and she wouldn't, Mcqueen explains.
Sean is very sad. So is Mary-Kate. Sean just rides his horse around pouting.
But the priest and the Playfairs and Mcqueen form some sort of plan to be hatched at the horse race. Now the plan is to make Will think that Sean is moving in on the widow Talon, who Will is very much interested in. They all tell Will that Sean loves the widow so much he wouldn't go back to Mary-Kate if Sean threw in £1,000.
The horse race is a lot of fun, and Sean wins. Reverend Playfair realizes that he recognizes Sean and knows who he is, but Sean asks him to keep it on the down low. He gets a trophy and a kiss from Widow Talon. Will is very upset and consents for Sean and Mary-Kate to court. There are all these rules, they need supervision and have to sit back to back in a horse cart.
Sean and Mary-Kate give their chaperone the slip and head off to frolic in the fields. She wants to do the traditional courting, but he's more interested in doing things the American way, a slightly more accelerated way of dating. A lightning storm kind of ruins their date, but it just gives them time for some hanky-panky.
Some lovey-dovey.
Some kissy-wissy.
And the next we see, they're married. And there's a great party with drinking songs. And the conspirators all congratulate themselves on a job well done.
Will bequeaths the fortune to Sean. And then he makes this big speech about the importance of a woman in a home. And he kind of announces that he and the widow Talon will be married. But she's like, nope, and walks out.
And Will realizes he's been had all along. And everything about Sean and Talon was a ruse, and Will slugs Sean.
And we get a flashback of Sean in a boxing ring as heavyweight trooper Thorne. And he killed a man in the ring.
Oof. That'll cripple you with guilt.
On wedding night back at the cottage, Mary-Kate is upset that her dowry didn't come with her. She wants the things of her life. They're part of her, and she doesn't see herself as married until the dowry is delivered. She locks herself in the bedroom. Sean kicks the door down, forces a kiss on her, which she then returns, and then he scoops her up and literally drops her through the bed.
What was any of that?
The next morning, all of Mary-Kate's things are brought over by Mcqueen and the lads. Seems they spent the evening convincing Will. He wouldn't send the money, though. And Sean doesn't care. He doesn't want any of Will's money. But Mary-Kate sees it as her money.
They go to Castletown to do some shopping and see Will. Mary-Kate wants Sean to confront Will about the money, and Sean refuses. She thinks she has married a coward and leaves him in Castletown to walk home.
You know, I feel like maybe they could have courted longer.
This isn't lovey-dovey. It's Haiti cringy.
Sean confronts Will in the pub, and Will wants a fight, but Sean backs down. Sean then goes to see Reverend Playfair, and Playfair is a sports buff, and he knows all about Trooper Thorne killing the man and vowing never to fight again. Sean is racked with guilt over what happened. He fought that guy for money. He killed him for money. So he hates money, and he doesn't want to fight Will, especially over money.
I can't fight or won't fight unless I'm mad enough to kill, he says.
But he will have to fight, to respect local traditions.
Drinking and fighting. Perfect.
And to keep his wife's love.
And really, Will Danaher has it coming.
Next day, Mary-Kate seems to be leaving on the train, but Sean finds her and drags her back to Innisfree. A crowd is forming behind them, expecting the showdown between Sean and Will.
He drags her and literally kicks her butt all across the countryside for 5 miles.
So, Maureen O'Hara did not have a stunt double for this scene. So that is her getting dragged through the fields, thick with sheep dung. Her body was covered in bruises and manure after this.
Sean demands the money, Mary-Kate's money, £350 from Will. Will pays, and Sean throws the money onto a fire. Will punches Sean. I'll be going home. I'll have supper on for you, Mary-Kate says, suddenly very satisfied. She felt she had maybe married a coward, but as long as Sean is willing to go a-punchin', all is good.
Then the fight breaks out, and one of the craziest Donnybrooks in film history unfolds.
It's a massive fight, and everyone is watching and betting. They fight all across the countryside, over hills and into rivers, until they get to the pub, where they stop for a pint. After they bicker about who should pay for the drinks, the fight resumes. Round 2 doesn't last as long, though, as Sean punches Will clean through the door of the pub.
When the sun goes down, Sean and Will head back to the cottage, singing Wild Colonial Boy and holding each other up. And they have supper together. Mary-Kate is pretty happy with this. And the next day, a weird little subplot pays off as the Catholics of the town all cheer for the Protestant bishop passing through town, making it seem like the town is a good parish for Reverend Playfair. And Will and the widow Talon seem to be courting. And we get a last look at all the townsfolk and Sean and Mary-Kate as they head back to their cottage. All smiles.
When I start dating, I want it to be just like this. All conspiracies and fistfights and tricking bishops.
Oh, my fingers are crossed for you, kid.
Okay, so pros and cons?
You bet. When Sam and I look at a film, we don't give it a rating or stars or anything like that. We just think of a few things we liked and a few things we didn't, and we make a recommendation on whether we think this film is worth watching for you.
Hit it.
My pros. Number 1, it's just a charming story. The characters are easy to like and easy to get invested in. The love story, although very accelerated, is believable enough and engaging. John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara have wonderful on-screen chemistry, and the scenes with them both, either when they're being tender or when they're bickering, are a lot of fun to watch. Number 2, the shots of rural Ireland. You can't beat the authenticity of filming on location, and the best parts of this film involve the characters tooling around the Irish countryside. This movie thrives on its location. Number 3, John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara are really underrated as one of the great screen couples in film history. They had an undeniable chemistry together, and although they were frequently at each other's throats in this film, their attraction for one another, their affection for one another, and their love for one another really come through as well. John Wayne is on no one's list of top romantic leading men in old Hollywood, but he does a good job of making it work here. He never once stops being John Wayne-y, but you believe that he is a John Wayne in love.
I love how you just made it sound like John Wayne is both the actor and the character.
That is totally what I am asserting, yes. My cons. Number 1, there's a visual flatness to this film. Whether it was filmed on inferior stock or just poorly lit or what, I don't know, but it's flat and almost blurry looking. Too much of what should be so great to look at comes across as lifeless and flat in an obscuring shadow. We watched the collector's edition DVD of this, so there should be no issues with the quality of the image. Just the actual native quality is so low. You read so much commenting on how beautiful this film is, but, well, yeah, the scenery is and the camera work is, but the quality of the finished product that we can view now is something I'm not really enthusiastic about. Number 2, the casual misogyny written into this script does not age well. Whether it is Mary-Kate being referred to as woman all the time, or the antiquated dating rituals, or the slapping, spanking, dragging, and force-kissing that goes on, the dismissive way that Reverend Playfair deals with his intelligent and well-intentioned wife, well, it's a bit of a tough watch in places. When the film steers away from this sort of thing, it's fine. It's fun. But the way Mary-Kate and the other women in this film are treated is a major downer. Number 3, the horse race scene. Reportedly directed by John Wayne himself, while John Ford was ill during the production, the horse race scene should have been much more interesting than it was. It was somehow filmed without interesting shots, or tension, or rising action, and the end result just seemed tacked on. And rather than giving us beautiful and loving shots of horses racing around the coast, we were given far too many shots of horses struggling to climb rocky hills, and not enough reaction shots from the spectators or the riders themselves. There's no passion in it. Wayne was no filmmaker, certainly not at this point in his career, and whatever you think about the Alamo, that's another bit of business. But by not having Ford oversee this scene, what could have been great was merely average. It's a missed opportunity, and I hate those.
And is this a watch for you?
Oh, for sure. I'd watch it again. It's not in my top 5 John Wayne films or anything, but it is in my top 2 Maureen O'Hara films, so that's something. But for sure, give it a watch. You're up.
Okay, so my pros. 1, the shots of the countryside. It was just so pretty. The rolling hills were so nice, and everything was so green. The countryside looked like such a nice and peaceful place to live. Until you see all the drama that was going down in the town, of course. Just looking at everything made me really want to visit Ireland. Plus, I loved the cute little stone bridges. They were so adorable. And it all seemed so isolated with how small the village was, like their own crazy little section of the country. 2, Mary-Kate. She was awesome. She was brassy, snarky, had a temper, and totally almost hit Sean a couple times. It was great. And to be fair, he kind of had it coming. I really liked seeing her stick up for herself sometimes. I didn't like seeing the priest call her woman and getting on her back just because she didn't want to sleep with Sean for their first night of being married. Like, excuse the heck out of you, dude who can't even catch a fish properly. She made her choice to sleep separate from him, and she stuck by it. Good for her. Now go back to trying and failing to catch that fish. 3, the end fight. This was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. They literally fought their way across Ireland. It was hilarious watching the film cut to different people finding out about the fight and dropping everything to go and watch it. I mean, a guy literally jumped out of his deathbed just at the sound of the fight. Plus, the whole bit where they called a truce for like 5 minutes so they could get a drink in the pub was so funny. And when Sean just punched Will through the pub door was amazing. Now my cons. 1, how the movie looked. I can't really say what exactly was going on here. It wasn't caused by the stream or anything since we were watching it on DVD. Everything just looked kind of blurry around the edges. I guess that's the best way to describe it. I know that around that time period, rubbing Vaseline on the camera lens was a trick to make scenes look sort of softer, but this was more like a dirty pane of glass was in front of the camera. Everything just looked slightly off and darker, and not super detailed. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was distracting. 2. The timeline. I couldn't really tell how long anything took, aside from the fact that Sean wanted to hook up with Mary-Kate after seeing her like twice. But seriously, how long after Sean and Mary-Kate met did they start actually legitimately courting? And how long did they court? I feel like this part was kind of important to know. Almost every interaction we see between them after they eventually get married is just them getting upset and fighting. And that was after only like 2 days of marriage. I would think that if they were courting for a reasonable amount of time, they would get to know each other and realize that this might be a concern. Or at the very least, Sean would have been able to pick up on the fact that Mary-Kate's dowry was really important to her, instead of just disregarding her feelings because he said so. 3. The whole dragging Mary-Kate back to town bit. What the actual heck was this? At first it was funny, but then it kept going, and kept going, and kept going. It lasted at least 10 minutes, and it progressively got worse. The crowd was cheering Sean on. I mean, one lady literally said, "Here's a good stick to beat the lovely lady." I swear I had to do a double take on that one to make sure I was hearing it right. It would have been one thing if Sean just grabbed Mary-Kate's arm and took her back to town, but he was straight up dragging her on the ground by the back of her shirt. It was all a bit much.
All right. And is this a watch for you?
This was quite a film. Honestly, I'm still kind of undecided about my feelings on it. Do I like it because of the crazy fight and the literal conspiracy to get Sean and Mary-Kate married? Or do I not like it because of the misogyny and the scene where Sean kicks a door down, grabs Mary-Kate by her hair, says she's not allowed to lock the door, kisses her aggressively, and then throws her so hard onto the bed it breaks, leaving her crying? I have some mixed feelings, so I'm not sure. But, for the most part, it is a really fun and enjoyable film. Plus, it has John Wayne. So, I'm going to say give this one a watch.
Okay. Well, there we have it. A pair of endorsements for this film, so definitely feel free to check out The Quiet Man already if you never have.
Thanks again to Miss Couch for our cold open, and to all of you for listening.
Please take a moment to let us know what you thought, both of this film and this episode.
And if there's a film you would like to see us cover, please let us know that too. We love getting requests.
We do. We really do.
And join us next week when we'll be continuing our month-long look at romance movies by having a watch of another film from the 50s.
You know, we're riding the 50s pretty hard for Romance Month.
Yeah, what's up with that?
I don't know. We'll make up for it next month.
Well, next week, it's Loving You, starring Elizabeth Scott in her last film role, and Elvis Presley.
Yeah. But until then, keep watching more movies and feel free to let people know all about our podcast. We are not a secret, and you don't have to keep us all to yourself.
So tell your friends.
Tell your enemies.
You never know. They might like having epic fistfights across the countryside as much as you do.
Maybe even more. For Sam the Sidekick, I'm Derek, and I love old movies. Additional research for I Love Old Movies, the podcast, is done by Nikki Weatherden. Audio clips come from freefx.co.uk. Images are used through the provisions of fair use, and our theme song, Burning Bridges, is by The Crocs.